Welcome back, everybody. It's another classic episode from Season 1. Enjoy. This is also our last classic episode. Our new season, Season 3, will be starting on March 5th. Welcome to our podcast, When Life Gives You Lemons. I'm Kevin Henry, and my partner in crime and wife is Palmy Henry. I have a rare disease known as spinocerebellar ataxia, which is a neuromuscular disease that's left me mobility challenged, as well as with a speech impediment and noise-induced anxiety.
Living with these disabilities, we have created some helpful hints and life lessons that we'd like to share and that have made our life possible. We consider ourselves disability advocates and intend to spotlight some disability issues and things we find interesting that we frequently encounter when we're out and about. Hi, welcome back. This is Palmy.
And this is Kevin.
We're at the 1st of the January, and we're going to go ahead and do something a little different this time than we've been doing. We're going to talk about travel, which was the original purpose of this podcast. We just found that we didn't have that much to add every month to keep the conversation going. So we've combined a bunch of our travels, and we have some recommendations for you and some do's and don'ts.
And those recommendations are going to include some apps we found useful, some websites we found useful as well.
Yep. So let's get started. So recently, last year and a half or so, we've done quite a bit of rental Airbnbs. And we've tried to do that because it is a lot more convenient for us when we travel to be in a house versus a motel or a hotel or whatever. But we've had some difficulties. We've specifically have stayed at two particular Airbnbs. Both of these were in Michigan. But wherever we go, I do try to search for an Airbnb that's handicapped. And it's almost impossible. Lots of the Airbnbs are older homes, and they have not been adapted to the ADA rulings.
Yeah, typically with Airbnbs, there are additional land or homes that somebody owns, and those tend to be older. Don't get me wrong, they're still quite nice, and they have nice views and antique furniture and stuff you don't want to mess up. They just don't take into account mobility issues. So
we would not suggest that, we would handicapped people use Airbnbs in this unless, and this is what we've done, you bring ramps, be cautious of how small the doors are, and be sure that you have full access to bathrooms. What we did in these two cases is we made ramps. We were going to family, so the family member that lives there made some ramps for the house specifically. And she went ahead, my sister, who it is, went ahead and checked out the Airbnb prior to us arriving to make sure that all access was available or that we could adapt it so it would be available. And what we did was she made several ramps. After we left the property, we had to make sure there was no marks on the doors where Kevin was trying to get through doors and, rammed into them or something. So you went through and made sure that no damage was left behind. But that is something you don't necessarily want to do every time you go traveling. So our recommendation is that it's not a great option for disabled.
I think a lot of the general public are realizing that Airbnbs are not the great thing they used to be because they tend to sneak in fees for cleaning and maintenance and all the other stuff that people weren't paying before. So they're not as cheap as hotel rooms, and they're not as strictly ADA regulated.
Yeah, but they sure are nice when you don't have to go out to a restaurant every single night, and you can actually cook, and they supply all the pans and all the accessories that you need to live there for a week or so. So I do like it. It makes it really hard for us to find something that is accessible.
Yeah, I thought it was really nice because being in a newcomer to Michigan, people would have pictures on their wall, knickknacks and stuff, and you're like, oh, what the heck is this about? Stuff that you don't know, not living there, and find interesting versus your generic hotel room art.
Yeah. So, like I said, we've done quite a bit of travel in the last 2 years. One of the hotels we stayed at, it was called a Thunderbird Hotel, and it's a chain. They're throughout the United States, and they strictly do not offer handicapped rooms, which I found very odd. They did, we had already booked at this point at this hotel, and it was a no cancellation fee, and I had requested a handicapped room. And the Thunderbird staff texted me back and told me they don't offer any handicapped rooms, but they could offer us the ground level room. And they felt that, however, the handicapped bathroom was not handicapped accessible. Kevin would be able to use it with a few modifications, which they did provide the ramp there was a one step to get onto the ground floor room. And they did provide that ramp, and it did work for us. But just so you know, the Thunderbird hotels are not handicapped, do not offer handicapped rooms.
They're themed to be an old style hotel, so from the 60s or 70s, I believe. And they're really handy, not handy, but the ability to go back in time. They give you a complimentary RC and moon pie.
That was cool.
May mean something to those of you in the South, and those of you in the North, I'm sorry, but those are not typically seen anymore.
And they also served fresh coffee, very good coffee, and nice donuts in the lobby daily. So that was kind of unique. And honestly, if we were able to travel and found another one, I wouldn't mind going there as long as we had a ramp to get into the room. Because the bathroom was accessible enough that you could, can't remember, was it a walk-in or was it a tub? I can't remember that.
It was a walk-in.
Yeah, it did have a walk-in shower, so that helped a lot. But what we have learned from our travels is I have purchased grab bars that are removable with suction cups, and we travel with that everywhere. I also redid our bathroom. We had a tub grab bar that I travel with also. And the suctional grab bars I bought from Temu, and they range from $5 to $30. So they're very reasonable. And the only thing I found is the suction part of the grab bar, you do have to keep really clean, because we've gone through a few of them where as soon as that suction cup gets dirty or has any dirt on it, the suction is not effective.
And you have to do that on a regular basis.
Clean it,
because once you use it and the dirt's there and it interferes with the suction, it never quite goes back the same.
Right. Yeah. We've gone through, I think, in the last 5 years, we've probably gone through two sets. So this last one is very efficient, though, and I did get it through Temu. Recently, we traveled to Hilton Head, and we stayed at a resort. It was a resort for timeshares, and we asked for a handicap room. And what did you think about it, Kev?
The room itself was really good. We had to rearrange some of the furniture to make it easier for me to get around it, but there's plenty of room to do that. So, again, it's like the Thunderbird Inn. Whenever you talk whether handicap rooms work for you or not, well, they may work for me, but not for you. So.
And you mentioned something in particular about these grab bars that you liked a lot. What was that?
Yeah, the bathroom At first, I thought it was just your typical handicap bathroom. It had grab bars in the shower and by the toilet. But the problem with the routine, regular grab bars you see are that in the bathroom, your hands are typically wet and they slide easily on those stainless steel bars. And these were fluted on the inside near the wall. So you had kind of a different...
Better grip?
Better grip, yeah, if you will. Your hand tended not to slip as much. It's still slippery, but it's better than it usually is.
And while we were there, we did quite a few activities. There's a large access to public beaches there. And what we found was, one, we tried to rent a beach wheelchair from the city, and they were constantly sold out. There's only like 10 maybe, which seems a very small amount compared to the public that there is there. And to get to the beach, we had a lot of trouble finding handicap parking spots to be even able to get to the beach. And once we got there, since we did not have access to the beach wheelchairs, basically Kevin went to the beach, went all that way to the beach, got to the end and turned around, took a few pictures, turned around and headed back because his chair definitely sank in the sand. In fact, we had some very courteous public people, men, that helped me put his chair. Basically, they grabbed his chair and put it back onto the ramp. But the ramps were good going to it. It's just once you get there, there was no parking spot. You couldn't get off the route at all to get out of the public's way. And so it wasn't real well thought out.
I should mention the beaches are accessible themselves by having a walkway or carpet that sits on top of the sand. It doesn't allow you to sink in. But once you get to the end of that, at the beach, you're kind of out of luck unless you have a sand-capable wheelchair.
And we, while we're there, we tried to find things that were handicap accessible for us to do. We didn't run into any restaurants that we had issues with, but we did do a scavenger hunt that we thought would be handicap accessible because you use your own car and you drive around. But it was a lot of the places that we went to that they sent us to were very busy areas. And Kevin couldn't get out. One, I couldn't find a parking spot for the to be able to get him out of the van. And two, it was so crowded, he wouldn't have wanted to be in there. His anxiety would have been to 100%. So sometimes things you think are handicap accessible end up not being so much. But it was fun. We chose, when we knew the areas that were busy like that, we chose to stay away from those and just proceeded on to the scavenger hunt.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they had some kind of event going on the island, but it was very, very busy that day in the parking lots. So might have just been typical summer traffic to the island. I don't know.
Speaking of travel, we drive typically to places versus fly. We've had issues. We'll talk about that later. But we recently stopped at a Buc-ee's on the way, and we've never been to one, so we went in, and it was so busy and chaotic that Kevin couldn't hardly even get to the bathrooms. The bathrooms were amazing once we got to them, but some lady fell right onto his lap while he was driving through the Buc-ee's because it was so crowded and people were trying to get through and stuff like that. So even some places that are fully handicapped accessible have issues with when they're busy.
Yeah, in that case, she was coming out of an aisle just wandering around shopping. I was going at the end of the aisle. I didn't see her coming. once we kind of physically met issues coming out, it wasn't a pleasant experience for either one of us.
Everybody else laughed, I'm sure. So we also went to Savannah, Georgia recently, and that was where the Thunderbird Hotel was, is where we stayed there. But specifically there, we find that trolley tours really help us in navigating the city and knowing where we want to go further, in the rest of the week or something. And we specifically rented the Savannah Hop On, Hop Off trolley tour. It was about $29.99 per person, so not cheap, and it was 2 to 3 hours. But the whole advantage was, what we thought was, that we could get on and off the trolley to places that we would want to visit. However, we found out that there was only one spot that Kevin was allowed to load and unload, and they said it was because of traffic. But they, right there in the name, it says hop on, hop off. And the whole advantage of that was not, we could not take advantage of. And the traffic in Savannah is horrendous. That was a disappointment.
But as Palmy just said, we do like to take a trolley tour of a city that we've never been to, just because it gives us an idea of places that interested us, that we want to go, or activities that we would like to participate in. Specifically, I think we saw an ad for a ghost tour. How did you enjoy that, dear?
Long story short, we didn't get to go because the tour left. We could not find a parking spot, a handicapped parking spot where I could offload Kevin's chair. And we got there like right on time, and they had left early without us. So we did not get that tour. It sounded like a good tour, though. We wish we'd have been able to do it.
It did sound very interesting.
So when we're traveling on the road, of course, we go to, it's a lot more convenient for Kevin to go to a rest stop versus go to a public gas station or something like that. And we've found good and bad situations. Can you want to elaborate on that, Kev?
I do, but first I want to say that in general, people are always offering to carry things for me or open doors or such. So in general, the positives are there, but they seem to stop when you get to restrooms.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, on this particular trip, it was very hard to find an accessible stall in public that was, or public restrooms, I should say, because usually one of the stalls would be out of order, and that would leave like perhaps another one. And one particular case, somebody was using that stall, and so I couldn't get in there, even though I really, really needed to get in there.
Was that the one where the guy was smoking in there?
That was the one where a guy was smoking, and he looked kind of young, so it was probably, I need to smoke here where their parents aren't going to find me kind of deal, so he wanted the bathroom and I would have been, okay with that, but dude, use a different stall.
Exactly. Or you found places where people that are non-handicapped are using handicapped stalls.
Well, yeah. When people, men, I can't speak to how women behave, but when men use a sit-down stall, they sit down, and to kill the time, they read their email or text or both. I don't know. But people tend to spend a lot of time in handicapped stalls once they get in there. And as Palmy, we were talking before this podcast, had mentioned with the increase in family restrooms versus male, female. I don't know how it goes in a female restroom, but in a male restroom, when the dad brings his kid in there, it's like the kid gets instantly shy and has to have a stall versus a urinal. Or he may just be freaked out by the fact that it's a urinal. I mean, we're talking like nude walking under school-age kids. So not the teenagers that need to smoke out of view with their parents or whatever. Possibly first-time users of public restrooms.
And you mentioned to me you thought that the United States public restrooms, although they meet the bare minimums of the ADA compliance, oftentimes the major drawbacks are that they're very hard to get around, turn around in, because they're just meeting the bare minimum.
They are. And I think that goes back to trying to make their bathrooms accessible they weren't versus building new stuff. The building is probably might have built a new building since the law went into effect. The public buildings were probably already there. And in order to meet the requirements, they just adapted their restroom, 1 or 2 stalls, whatever was required. So if one stall doesn't function properly, public restrooms are not real good at getting that stuff speedily fixed. So I think in one restroom we stopped in the exact same rest stop, and the one stall was out of order when we went, and it was also out of order a week and a half later when we returned home.
Recently, we went to we came upon something we never came upon before. We were going to Lee's Summit, which is near Kansas City, where our daughter lives, and I requested a handicap room when I the hotel, and I was told. I mean, I was not told it couldn't get it. You know, they didn't text me back or anything. In the notes, I put in that we must have a handicapped shower, hand bars, etc. And when we got there, they told us that they do not offer the handicap. We were staying 7 days. They were told they do not offer the handicap room that many days in a row, which I find ironic. But they said, I imagine it's because they don't have very many of them, and so they want one available for other. But we were staying there 7 days. We also had an issue with both our dogs are service dogs, and we also had an issue with being confronted by the owner, manager, whatever he was, that our dogs were not service dogs. So that was a little chaotic, and we were not very happy. It was a Comfort Inn in Lee's Summit, and we would not recommend that place ever again. We've also come across restaurants where have too narrow doors where Kevin can't even get in. In some cases, when he was able to use a walker, he was able to use the walker to get through the door. But old towns like Kansas City, which a lot of them, it's a very older town, have just adapted stuff. And we've come across bathrooms that he's not been able to get to because of a lot of the time, which I find is very ironic, is that lots of stuff are piled in front of the handicap or even just the plain restrooms. We've come across that quite a bit, especially in gas stations where they pile, sodas, etc., down a narrow way to get to the bathroom, and Kevin's not able to get through that because of all the clutter that is along the walls. Back to, you'd probably noticed that we drive a lot, talked about a lot of driving, and we tend to do a lot more driving because we've had such bad experiences with the airlines. Kevin, can you allude to that a little more?
Yeah, usually you start your journey when you get on a wheelchair flight with a wheelchair and get off with a wheelchair in pieces.
Yeah,
because the wheelchair is basically luggage. So they pile luggage on top of and next to and under the wheelchair itself.
So we've traveled quite a few times with on an airline, and we've gone to Southwest. We've used Southwest, American, United, and we've had the same issues. At some point, the chair has become unable to be used because they take out the battery. And so a lot of times it's just the fact that they're taking the battery off the chair that causes the damage of somebody that does not know how to do that properly, because they have to take out the battery in order for it to fly. You also need to know that you need to know the specific weight of your chair. Lots of chairs don't say it on any stickers or anything. This new one that Kevin has does. It's 407 pounds. So what we've had in the past, issues we've had in the past, is we've had to do extended layovers because the weight is not taken into consideration when we book the flight, even though we tell them he is in a wheelchair. And we've been bumped off from flights because the chair is too heavy for what they have already planned, what's in the airplane. So that's not fun.
Yeah, according to the ADA, I'm in a power chair, so obviously weight is a major concern to the airline, but you're also authorized to bring a collapsible manual chair with you that they stow with you in the cabin. Now, the problem is that there's usually a lot of misunderstandings when you travel, especially for the first time or perhaps the first time on that airline. I was reading an article on social media about a woman who had read the ADA and said, well, I'll bring my manual chair with me. And it was one of those custom, non-foldable, expensive ones you buy for a certain activity. Well, because it didn't collapse, at first they told her she wasn't allowed to bring it, but she stuck by her guns and basically made them. And then they broke it by trying to make a non-collapsible wheelchair collapse.
Yeah, that's typical, I think. All they want to do is get everything in and get going. So to conclude our podcast today, here's some recommendations. That we've learned from traveling. We have bought a 4-foot ramp that we travel with that travels with us in our van, which we have a conversion van. We also, like I told you before, we buy the grab bars. We travel with grab bars, several different types of grab bars. And what the other thing we found very, very useful in the recent past, we haven't done this, we just started doing this, is we found a website that is called AccessibleGo.com. And it's a hotel, rental car, van rental, mobile rental, and flight travel site that you specifically put in what your disability is and what needs you need to have for any of those things that they offer. You put in the name of the city, when you're checking in, when you're checking out, just like you would book anywhere else. How many people, of course. And then they specifically ask you your accessibility needs. And what we have found is this is amazing that you put in what you need, and then you choose a hotel. And once you've chose the hotel and the pricing that you want, they book it through this company, the AccessibleGo.com, and then they call the property or the car rental or whatever it is, or the mobility rental place, and they specifically verify that all your needs will be met, which is amazing. And we've done it twice now through this company, and we have had nothing but amazing results. Every place we've been, we've got the handicapped accessibility, no question asked. It's just been really easy to work with, and we are not sponsored by them, so I don't want you to think that we're getting paid to say this, but honestly, it's been the best thing we've ever had so far in traveling.
One thing Palmy has not mentioned is it's completely free.
Well, yeah, it's part of your, just like a reservation company like booking.com or anything like that. I'm sure they get paid somehow, but I'm not sure how. But it offers reasonable rates, so they don't seem to be, putting in on the front end.
And just as a shout out, they are doing an incredible job.
Yes. And it is easy to log in and get an account. And once you have your accessibility needs in there, it always looks for the same needs unless you need something specific for that area.
This is a really good service because, as we all know, one handicapped person is not the same as another handicapped person. Last episode, we talked about the deaf culture. They could also analyze the needs of a blind person or mobility challenge. When it comes to the term mobility challenge, you don't really know, is that quadriplegic or somebody that just has a problem with a certain disease that cannot allow them to walk.
Mobility, yeah. We've been to a hotel once where we asked for a handicap room and we received it. However, there was 2 steps that Kevin had to go up in order to get to it. So accessibility does not mean the same thing for everybody.
If you're in a situation where you're like using a walker, the steps are not going to be as bad an obstacle, or perhaps even a manual wheelchair where you can pop up over a curb or a stair perhaps. But as it is with a power chair, you can't do that. Now, this one does do small obstacles. I think they say under 1 inch is what they plan for, but under 1 inch has never been a problem with any other wheelchair. The power chairs, I just kind of brute forced it over, got going real fast, and momentum carried me over it or threw me off the chair, either one.
Okay, well, I think we're going to end this podcast at this time. Do you have anything else you need to say, Kev?
I think you should also mention a couple of apps. The parking, there are 2 apps in particular. There's one that allows you to report a problem with the parking, as in people with non-handicapped placards are parking there. And there's another app that allows handicapped spaces in new-to-you situations. And that could have been very useful on that last scavenger hunt Palmy was talking about. We didn't know about it then. But anyway, because everybody is a little different, okay, those are specifically mobility issues. Everybody should look in either the App Store or the Play Store, wherever you get your apps from, and see what apps do and don't apply to you. Now, as a word of warning, some of the stuff in the Apple Store will cost, although it's free on the Android Store. So if you're using an iPhone, you're paying what's called the Apple tax. If you're on an Android, It may be free. It's one of those, I can't tell you what is or is not free without getting somebody with an iPhone to see if it's free on theirs, because I use an Android.
All right, you're ranting over?
Yes.
Can you tell he doesn't like Apple?
I bring this up simply because the manufacturer of the power chair has a free app that they provide to users that allows them to access, say, a manual, report a problem, all that, good to have stuff. It's free in the Android store, but it costs in the Apple store because it's a weird thing. It's a long story, but it's called the Apple tax.
All right. Well, let's say goodbye, and we'll see you next podcast.
We'll see you next time, folks. Remember, we're taking a break, and we're not going to start again until February for the new season.
Bye now. We are always looking to improve the podcast, so if you want to hear a specific topic discussed, drop us an email. Our contact information is listed on our website. It's www.whenlifegivesyoulemons.net.